maybe I have a foot or something like that, not much more than you do. And then the blue light, I have here on the left side of me, but actually it's more behind me in the way that most of it's configured. So I use a ring light for my key in there.
But the blue light is in front of you, right?
The blue light is essentially, if I'm sitting in the chair in the booth, the blue light is about right there for me. I'm sorry, you can't see me until I put that on. It's right about there. So it's just a little bit in front of the plane of me, but it is canted back toward those acoustic tiles to hit them almost entirely. And so I'm really has a pretty strong angle toward the back, and then I let it fall down from there. So not much of its light is coming forward, and the gray background that I have in my booth soaks up most of it, and it doesn't spill around a lot. It's hard to light a booth, though.
I mean, to give you an idea, like, okay, right now I'm touching the I don't know, yellow-orange light. Can I see roughly where it is?
Yeah. Yeah, limited space in a voice booth. That's just the way it is.
And then blue on the other side here, right there. But Jeffrey, I like your idea. Now I'm thinking, can I rip all this apart and put lights actually in the panels or in the seams or something like that?
Alex, did you hear comms for you?
I always thought it was pronounced descript, like delaminate.
That's how I've been saying it. I was literally just watching one of their videos this morning, and they say a descript, or at least the person doing but it was their videos on their help
their video.
site.
So I think that we're gonna make that canon.
Put it in the style guide.
That's right. Needs to be part of the lookbook. In this case, the sound book.
Not to say the mood board, which is my favorite of those advertising memes or tropes.
Ah, yes, not to be confused with the mood ring that used to come from gumball machines.
Or the vision board.
Vision board costs about $100,000 more. Same idea, though. Unless it's BORED.
Got a new mic. Haven't tested it yet.
What is it?
It's the Rode.
Oh,
The NT1.
NT1 Generation 5.
So you'll be testing, I assume, same thing we talked about a few weeks ago. If you can pre-set it, pre-configure it, and then ship it out and have it reliably.
I can already tell you I'm not going to ship it out. like it's already reached a no, we're not going to do this. I'm playing with it, and it'll be interesting as a ship out. And I don't know if I'll keep it or not. We'll see. It depends on how it sounds compared to this one. The issue with it is that it's too complicated to ship out. This rig, there's no mount for it, and it'll be too complicated. People will be like, "What the what? It's too heavy. It's too big." We have enough trouble with the MV7, so I mean, this will be too much. So we're not going to send it out, but it's cool.
I have the regular one. It's so heavy.
Yeah. All right, stand by. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about virtual and digital production. Our second hour is usually something that, we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we've got Glenn Sanders here. Glenn Sanders is the founder of Zaxcom. So Glenn's going to give us a little bit of the history, how Zaxcom got built, what they do, some of their newer products. We're really excited to have them. So if you've got questions for Zaxcom, go ahead and throw those into, and for Glenn, go ahead and throw those into the second hour. Make sure to tag those in Makana. And if you've got questions for the first hour, the digital production, general questions about all things digital, let us know and throw those into the questions. We have got a lot of room for those today. And make sure to vote on the questions. You're the producers. So if you're watching here, you're deciding not only what we talk about, but when we talk about it. So go ahead and vote questions up and down. And let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have? Our
first one this morning comes from David Brady in New York City. And David says, are there any good tutorials or courses for learning Apple Motion?
Go ahead, Marty.
Well, Ripple Training has a whole series of videos, training videos for Motion. And if they're anything near like the videos they produced for DaVinci Resolve, they should be pretty great.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I look for the name Mark Spencer, and he does them for Ripple Training. Mark is one of the leading trainers in all things Apple Motion. He knows the program inside and out, and he is engaging and really fun to watch. So I would go in that direction. Motion is an interesting product. It's only $49, and you think, oh, this should be a pretty simple program. It is one of the most deep and complex programs that you will run into, predominantly because in the back end of the program, it has so many complex motion graphics type controls. Literally, there's thousands of settings behind the scenes in Motion. So Apple's done a really good job, I think, of making it easy to kind of understand the basics and get into it pretty simple. If you get some training from somebody like Mark Spencer, you'll dive in and get some really useful stuff done really quickly. But I'm 10 years into being a Motion owner, and I have probably touched 25% of the program. It's that deep.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was building time countdown clocks, I was talking to Mark about how I do them. And by the way, Ripple Training is what you want to get, for motion training. But I told Mark, I'm doing this thing. I do this countdown, and then I reverse the time, and I do all this stuff. And he goes, "Have you thought about keyframing the time code?" And I was like, "You can keyframe the time code?" It was like saved me like years of time, like over the number of countdown clocks I built. And it was like one little question: have you thought about doing it this way? And so between Mark Spencer and Alex Gollner, those are my two, Motion go-to experts. But unfortunately, Alex doesn't do as much training as Mark. so anyway, I would highly recommend Mark Spencer's series on Motion. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida is up next. What are some effective ways to draw audience to your virtual conference aside from the regular show? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm going to use the Carnegie Hall answer: promotion. It's very important to get the name out and to get everything out. Don't overdo it. Don't spam people. I have conferences even from 10 years ago that over spam my email, and so I just throw them into spam and I don't even think about them every year. You want to be able to utilize their social channels. So having somebody build up a card with that person's face and their session and say, can you post this on your channels so they're aware that you're going to be talking at this event is always a great way to do that. If they have a very powerful, work with people on the titles. This is the one problem I always have with these conferences is people come up with titles that are just weak and they could be so much better. And I don't mean make a title that sounds like, and what happens next will make you fall apart or whatever, but actually just to create a title that gets a lot of engagement and then promote it that way. Don't jam all the events in one tight window. If it's a one-day conference and you got way too much content, people might get overwhelmed and they'll just not come anyway. And then finally, I know many people that use giveaways to bring people in, not only to bring people in, but measure how they're staying in. Like, for instance, halfway through a session, somebody will say a number or something like that, and then you have to fill out a form where you put in that number, and then that way they get a good idea of content. So those types of things will help you bring people in and keep people in on your virtual conference.
Go ahead, Bill.
Draw audience to a conference. You're in the realm of marketing. So some of the basic marketing ideas really come into fruition here. The biggest part of this is trying to figure out who's your likely attendee and finding a way to reach them. And very quickly, I will tell you the story of once upon a time, I had an account that was the local Cadillac dealer where I lived. And they gave me a bit of information that 50 to 60% of the people buying Cadillacs migrated from 2 versions of Buicks and one other car. And so I went to the DMV and found out that I could access their mailing lists and just attack those people. And that made all the difference in the success of the promotion, because I found the people who are most likely to accept the offer to come. Rather than broadcasting, I was narrowcasting. And so that, I think, is your task. Figure out who the people are, what they're interested in, and then figure out whether there's web advertising or something else you can do, some sort of marketing, whether it's mail or building a little network. You try to get as close to that type of person as possible, and your response rate will go way up in terms of success.
Yeah, I will say that the most effective way to do this is to slowly build up a connection with the attendees. So you said aside from a regular show, but doing something that's fairly regular over a long period of time, or doing multiple activations over a long period of time, is a really great way to do something, and it's the least expensive way to do a lot of these things. So, definitely think about how you can incorporate that into your workflow. When you decide that it's more of a triage kind of thing, like we need to promote someone right now, Google AdWords work really well. They're super effective, as is Facebook. So, we can talk a lot about whether they should be effective or whether it's right to be effective, but wow. Like when you really understand how Google AdWords work and Facebook ads work, it's like looking into the sun. Like, if you get the description right and you have something solid on your end to receive that description, you're absolutely going to get output. So it's, it's just a matter of honing those things. You do need to do a little study. It's not worth doing Google AdWords or Facebook ads if you haven't taken some of the courses or watched some of the bits and pieces of how to frame those and how to put those together. But if you have some money and you're just trying to make it happen now, you can definitely get it out to a lot of people. Now, that landing page is going to be super important that it comes back to. So whatever they're going to, they have to really clearly understand what they're going to get out of it. And it's going to have to, be aimed at your target audience and make sure that they're given an opportunity to do that. Depending on how much you're charging, a pretty common thing to do is have people pay a little bit or none at all for an introductory thing that's going to set up for the virtual conference. So you get them into something that is going to give them value, but is going to set them up to join a bigger piece. And the only other thing I would say is don't stack. There's no reason to do tracks in a virtual conference. Just make the conference longer. There's no reason to create FOMO. Next question.
Samuel Nordvik in Norway comes up with, do you have any experience with Waves Max with 2 X's volume, considering it to use in a vMix as well as a brickwall limiter?
Go, Jason.
So I've actually played with the demo, and my immediate and first thought was, if I'm game staging correctly, I don't need this. The only thing that I've used that's anywhere near it are the new BBE plugins. The L82 loudness maximizer is a really nice control, and it is, of course, is a modeling off of a rack mount from several years prior.
Next question.
Comes from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. When will we see 8K 120 frame per second live streaming?
Go ahead, John.
I'm the proxy for Guy. He threw the ball to me in Discord. So he posted Red Connect, which is a 8K workflow using 2110 SMPTE. But it looks like it runs on a local LAN across 10 gig fiber into their CCU and then out to 2110. That's what he wanted everybody to know.
Yeah, you'll see some more, a lot more about it. This at NAB. We'll cover it. We've got some friends that have been working on some of the technology around that, and so I didn't know that Red was going to talk about it before NAB. so anyway, they might have jumped the gun a little bit, but yeah, we'll talk about it with a couple of folks. We may, in some of our coverage, especially towards the evening, we may bring some stuff in where we capture some stuff that we can show about that. I think that you're going to see, that is transport, but how do you stream it? And I think that there's some really interesting tech that's going to come out at NAB that's going to talk about it. Now, when is it going to become normal? That's still a little ways out, but I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more 8K 120 as we go into 2024. And so I think you're going to see it start to bubble a little bit. But one of the things that is rumored is that all the iPhones will be a 120 capable, maybe not 8K, but 120 capable, like all the way down to the base models in the next version. All the TVs are 120 already. Most of your other tablets are going to 120. So there's a lot of things that can play back 120, and it's just a matter of turning the content pipe on. And the problem really is that it's really expensive. Like you're talking about needing a 100 meg connection or 200 meg connection minimum, and that's pretty compressed. That's it's at the same level of compression to do the math. You're talking a solid as a 1080p stream. You're really talking about 100 megs a second. So it's a thing. Next question.
Samuel Nordvik's back from Norway with, what is the reason that the master frame rate still needs to be set to drop frame 29.97 frames instead of 30 for live streaming? Is this something that is baked into the audio analog to digital converters, or is it the audio encoding format?
It's still there's a lot of things that are at this point. Audio doesn't need it. Video doesn't need it. They could all go to whole frames. Film a lot of times is now being shot in 24. Things can be done in 30, but the problem is that there are a lot of systems out there, and some of the systems can handle 30, and some can only handle 29.97. And so, as a safety, we do everything at 29.97 if we're going to do it in that format, because we just don't want to deal with it later. To have to manage that. But the reality is most of the modern tools are capable of 30, but you'll find things that just won't even turn on, won't show anything at 30 frames a second. And so you don't want to get yourself into that position. So most of us are still using 29.97 as we go out. You are correct though, for streaming, most of the streaming platforms are all at 30. So no matter what you give them, if you give them 24, it goes out as 30. If you go at 29.97, 30. So some of them do 60, 25, 30. so they're YouTube, Facebook, and a lot of other ones are standardized on the 30 frame per second. No matter what you do, their transcoders are going to convert it to one format. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, VR Florida, up next. What do you do with the gear you test but does not make it into production? School donations or?
Go ahead, Marty.
Well, yeah, that's certainly one way to make good use of equipment that you no longer want. There are also Facebook groups dedicated to gear swaps and gear sales, and houses of worship are always looking for good gear that can be used, and with it somewhat less, requirements for reliability.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So when I get products in to test, some of them I actually end up keeping because you never know when I need to go back to them for some reason. Even though I don't put them into my regular production there, I will give them to a Goodwill or anything like that if they are completely out of use for me. Some people, what they'll do is they'll set up a web page and then they'll sell their stuff. I personally don't like to sell products that I get or buy because they're used, and I just if they fail, then I feel bad on that. And of course, as Marty said, there's many places that you can go to give away and to sell items, and I highly suggest not to sell the item for the actual price. That's the one thing that really frustrates me on these marketplaces.
Go, Jason.
I'm with Jeffrey. I think it's unethical to sell something that you didn't pay for. I'm largely the same. I tend to give it to either clients or more recently people on office hours that either will enjoy it the most or that need it the most. And I'm in the process of moving. So along those lines, Alex, I think you might just have a care package coming back from NAB.
Very good. Go ahead, Bill.
And don't forget, in your local area, you may have something like in the two places I've lived recently, the Boy and Girl Scouts generally have electronics recycling days that they do as a kind of a service organization. And they're great because the kids can probably grab what they need, and that's another generation. The other thing is, don't just throw it away. Most states now do electronic recycling. There's a lot of stuff in these electronic things that are not particularly good to toss in a landfill. So make sure that you have a backstage recycling process. I know here in California they have regular recycling things, and they try to treat the post-use waste stream responsibly.
Yeah, I would love to say that I just have a lot of stuff laying around. I don't usually give it away. I try to. It was funny when I was closing up my warehouse. I went to a couple of schools, and they were like, "Oh no, we can't take donations, or we don't want the donations, or they didn't want." And that was like, I have 10,000 square feet of gear, and about half of it could go somewhere, and they just didn't want it. I did have one high school say, "Oh yeah, we'll come in." And they came in and burrowed in and just took boxes and boxes and boxes of cameras and little cameras, that I definitely didn't need. And so so we try to, but I found that it was much more difficult to give it to the schools than I thought it would be, to make that actually happen. There was a lot more red tape than I expected. I try to test things as fast as I can so that I can take them back to Amazon if I don't. And I will admit that I've become, we've talked about this in the past, I've become very, because Amazon's return policy is so easy, I have to admit that at first I thought there's no way they can make money at this, and then I realized they could because I'm very specific about buying it from them, because I know that I can just take it to Whole Foods and go shopping and drop off my stuff. It's pretty lethal. Next question.
Khalid Abjamani, it looks like, in Hassa, Saudi Arabia, and I'm probably getting the name terribly messed up, and I apologize for that. Hey guys, I want to share this amazing Kickstarter keyboard, which if released could be a game changer, and he's got the link there.
Go ahead, Marty.
So this was a hot topic in our pre-show discussion, and it is a very interesting product. It's basically a clear keyboard that is overlaid onto a video screen that can be programmed in different ways and segmented, and you can have different things under different keys if you want to. There was an area at the top that was separated with different controls, and it also has some rotary dials and some other controls around the perimeter that sound really, really useful and handy because they can be programmed to do different functions. This could be a very interesting product.
Go, Jeffrey.
So it's a Sydney-based company. It's what it is. Think of it like a tablet without the touch screen. You're attaching to the computer. 1920 by 1080, 60 hertz IPS display, 300 nits at 157 ppi. It's got a quad-core ARM processor inside there and 8 gigabytes inside. So you can't use it as a display, but you can actually load in videos and other objects into the device, and it will then display on the bottom. It's also not a touch screen. It's using what's called maglev switches, which are basically these little magnets that are holding the keys up. And when you press them down, it sends out electrical signals. It never touches the screen from what they're saying on the page. It's USB 2.0, and it takes about 3 to 4 watts of power, but there's 2 side USB ports if you want to put it on numeric pad. Yeah, okay, numeric pad. But if you take more power than what the USB is offering, they do have a side powered. You can double USB it, or you can plug it into the wall. Tactile and linear switches, and they're expecting a December release with their Kickstarter.
I'm trying to resist the urge to buy it. I'm trying to resist it. I don't know if I'll make it. It looks really cool, and it looks like you could do a lot of interesting things. I will say that I wish that they, on their demos, they should show a couple of, they want to show off the fact that it's just a video screen there. So they've got animations going across behind the keys, which makes my skin crawl. Like looking at it is just like very upsetting. I could never do that on my keyboard. But having the interesting thing there is that, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for it to be responsive, so it can be changing those keys, and it's a full keyboard. It's not just a smaller, collection of keys. It's a full keyboard that can be very responsive to what's happening at that moment. I think it's super exciting. I'm really glad that Khalid pointed it out to us, and I'm gonna try to resist it. I think Khalid has become a very expensive friend. All right, next question.
Next question comes from David Brady in New York City. Expecting delivery of the Obsbot Mini 4K, what are the differentiators between it and the Insta360 Link?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, the biggest one is it's USB 3.0, whereas Instalink is USB 2.0. And same thing with the previous Obsbot is it's USB 2.0. They also have, and I can never do the right, it's 1/1.5. I don't know how you actually say that, but that's the sensor size inside. And then the other thing is they're doing different types of gestures. The one thing I really didn't care too much about with Obsbots was if you raised your hand, that's what connected you to it, which if anybody was very handsy, that would turn on and off the that functionality. The new types of gestures allow it for a little bit more robust type settings from there. And I think that's going to be a pretty good game changer if we've got the right sensor and it works really well.
I mean, for a lot of us that are a little bit more controlling, the gestures in both the Insta360 Link and the Obsbot mean almost nothing to us because they never really frame the way we want them to, and I don't really want them trying to figure that out. But I think for some people it could be useful. But there's a bunch of us that don't want any of those things. So when we look at what's differentiated in is a slightly larger, you have a slightly larger chip that's there. So we'll see how the sensor looks. It's a wider angle, so I don't think that the slightly larger buys us a lot because you have to zoom in more than you do with the Insta360 Link. The big thing that we're really interested in with the Obsbot and what might make a difference for us is specifically the OSC controls. So being able to talk directly to the camera and have potentially full control with OSC is what we're really interested in. I don't think that we were kind of ignoring the Obsbot until we realized that OSC was there, and so now we're looking at it very carefully and questioning our Insta360 links. so hopefully either Insta360 needs to get OSC, or a lot of us may start looking at the Obsbot pretty seriously. Next question.
Next one comes from Jeffrey Powers here on the panel, Madison, Wisconsin. What's the best way to do a kiss cam or something similar at an event?
Go ahead, Marty.
So if you're looking for something small, I'd recommend looking at Marshall Electronics, who have these miniature cameras. In fact, I'm using one right now that can have interchangeable lenses, so you can change your focal length and your zoom and focus. And they have interchangeable lenses, and you can get them with USB output, HDMI output, SDI output, and NDI output. So they are very interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, and Bill.
Having done some nightclub work in my time where we did a lot of promotional kinds of things, to me, the key here is to make sure you're in an environment where everybody is focused on the output of that camera. The audience in general is watching something. That's kind of built into where you normally see it, which is baseball games and things like that, where they have the huge sports billboard. People understand that there's live cameras, and when they see themselves, or if people around them in the crowd see them and say, hey, you're on the kiss cam, it really engenders that back and forth live thing that everybody finds so charming and fun. If you don't have that, it's going to be really hard to get people's attention so that the people act naturally. So just make sure that you direct them to it, or you have some process for making sure the live shot of the audience has awareness in the overall crowd. That's when they work best.
The secret to kiss cams is ringers. Just so you know, like it is. So they prime the pump in most stadiums and arenas. They have 1, 2, up to 4 or 5 people that are in the crowd that are cued to do it when they know that they're supposed to do it when they see the kiss cam, and that's why they can get to them really fast, is because they already have them framed up. And so that kind of helps kind of loosen the whole system. There are a lot of people after that. There's a lot of people that are doing it themselves, but it's really hard to break the ice. And so what they've learned is to put people and you'll see the same thing with like someone dancing really funny or doing something really goofy, and you think that that's just some random person. It's not. so anyway, I hate to give you the red pill there, but it's not most of those things are kind of organized. We've worked on a couple of those projects, and so anyway, they're organized, and it makes it a lot better. It's really hard to do if you don't put ringers in. It's just hard to find people. It's hard you have a very small amount of time to get people going. And so having a couple to start to kick it off with makes a big difference. Just a quick reminder also is that we have plenty of room for questions. So if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them in and make sure to vote on those questions and let us know when you want to talk about them. Stack them up in the order that you think is important, and get the questions in for both our first hour, which we're still working on for for another half hour, or for Zaxcom in the second hour. All right, next question.
Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida says, in a live concert, when there's an effect such as an extreme reverb on a specific word, how exactly is that done? Any automation, or is someone just sweating bullets to nail the timing manually? How is that documented from show to show?
Good, Marty.
Well, I think that would depend on the artist and the budget for the show. You know, in a club or a smaller venue, or for somebody who is not really on a national tour, the audio engineer would know all of those cues because they're doing it, and they would have the board set up and they would bring up the reverb for that. But in a larger show, a touring act, some of those things have quite extensive automations and scripting, all according to time code, and an edit list that is down to the microsecond, because it has to be timed to the music. So there would be a click track that the drummer would be going to, and there would be cues for starting the next song. They can be highly scripted and automated. Sure.
Good, Bill.
I did it once upon a time in my early days in radio, and it was an interesting thing because I realized that to just apply reverb to one word and then let the reverb ring out in silence and then go to the next word, that's pretty simple. All right, you just click in the reverb, say the word, get the reverb tail to finish. When you're trying to do it at a higher level so that the word is still reverberant while you add in the original audio and continue on your read is a bit more complex. I had to take some serious time in post to make that hang out, do the word, patch it into a second track over the thing so that I could come back in as the announcer clear while the reverb was still hanging over the tail. It can be a little goofy sometimes.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and what made me think of this, I was just watching a video and that hit, and then of course immediately I'm thinking, man, was someone sitting there just with their job depending on hitting the button at the right second and then taking that off. I'm curious, Marty, with the automation. I mean, in a live show, I'm sure it's timed pretty well, but never exact. I mean, they may be talking to the audience and all that stuff. I mean, the timing can't be that exact, can it?
The time code is per song, so they can stop and start between them, so they can riff between the songs. But and it depends on the act. Some acts are not doing that at all. So some acts are out there playing it, but when you see a lot of intricate sound effects and intricate lighting effects and smoke effects and so on and so forth, that are happening in fast succession, it usually means that it's on, as Marty said, on time code and on a click track. For a lot of those, especially pop singers, their automation is somewhere between 10 and 80%. Of what you're hearing is accompanying. And it's not just the click track. It can be a lot of the music, some of the voices, some of the, it doesn't mean that people on stage aren't doing some of it live. But you have to remember also, when you look at the amount of acrobatics that are going on, a lot of times you wouldn't be able to sing the way that people expect you to sing and do the things that they're doing there at the same time. And so it is pretty complicated, and so that even their voices get replaced for certain songs or at certain times. The key is that they know when those things are going to be, when they have an open space, and that's usually between the songs and sometimes during the songs. There's kind of an opened area for them to do things, because that continues to create that the facade that's there for those larger live shows. Some of it can be cued, but a lot of it's animated, and they rehearse these things. They build up these stages in a rehearsal stage, and they rehearse everything down, and they program it all down, and they get it all working. And then once they've figured it out, then the artist comes and rehearses with them to make sure that they understand it before they go on tour, because these are $100 million projects, and so they for a large tour. But a lot of it is still animated or automated.
And frankly, it was just on the heels of the Descript show got me thinking. I wonder if it's happening already, or if folks are looking at using real time speech recognition, so that you could, it could analyze the song and wait for that, that key word to then trigger the next word is where the effect takes
Even
place.
with AI, that would be so hard for it to do. It'd be a chain reaction of creating that for now. But I think that, they could definitely do it at some point. But right now, they've got it honed to a pretty solid pipeline, that is that makes all of this work. We work with some of the folks that do that kind of work, and it's a science. And they figured it out.
They're using tools like Universe and Isadora to do show scripting and automation, and there can even be either a director who is announcing, in their in-ear monitors, counting down to the next cue, or it could be a video screen with a countdown timer or flashing lights or something to cue them to start at the next point.
And those are more of the for the theater ones, in some of the smaller, the bigger acts have a whole different set of tools, to do that. But it's a really interesting puzzle. At some point, we'd like to bring some folks on to talk about it a little bit. A lot of times they don't want to talk about it, so I'm not sure when we'll, sometimes you don't want to see how that sausage is made. You just want to enjoy it. It's getting more and more complicated because now they're adding AR experiences to it. So during the song, there's things that happen. The wristbands are those little wristbands that you get on the way into your Taylor Swift show. I know that, Jeff, you went to the Taylor, you probably went to a lot of Taylor Swift shows in Florida. Just kidding. So you're not a Taylor Swift fan. Anyway, the Taylor Swift fan.
I thought you must be referring to Jeffrey by mistake. Not this.
I am so a Swiftie. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, but those her concerts have these little wristbands that you get. They're $8 each, in case you're wondering how much those things cost, and they light up and they do designs and they know where you are, seated, and there's all kinds of things. But those things, when you start adding those kind of participatory events into it, it really has to be tightly timed to make all of that stuff work and to have it go through. All right, let's go to the next question.
Next question comes from Jeff Cohen at Miami Beach. Curious to hear opinions. Do you like watching videos of concert performances shot and uploaded by the audience attendees? Do you find the audio even listenable?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, so the two are related because it really was me trying to find an official video of a live performance. And it was so difficult because this was YouTube, and what kept showing up in the search results were all these horrible attendee videos. And, and some are just downright horrible video, they're a mile away. Some, it's decent video. Okay, it's clearly an audience, but I mean, they're holding it and annoying everyone else, so we have a good shot on the video. But I mean, I've just yet to find one where the audio is listenable. I mean, sometimes the official video, whatever they're doing wrong, doesn't have great audio, let alone hearing it from someone, who's 100 yards back.
You go, Jeffrey.
For me, it depends on the situation. If we're talking like a stadium or we're talking like a smaller room where it actually sounds pretty decent with just a regular microphone, then I might listen to it. I am impressed in how the audio on the phone, the iPhone 13, iPhone 14 has come, especially if you do it in cinematic mode, because there's something about it that really tries to do its best on audio. But if you move around, that becomes the problem because you start zooming in on the guitarist, and then you lose some of the sound from the other sides. But if you keep it in a stable area, you can get all of that sound right there. And yeah, the raising of the hand is annoying. But last week I was doing some video of a local band, and I could zoom in on somebody raising their hand, showing a little bit better of a shot than what I could actually get from the PTZ camera. So there's a little bit of give and take on that part.
Good, Bill.
I'm right there with Jeffrey. I think I've seen it done satisfactorily, not professionally, but to where, oh yeah, I enjoyed this moment in the concert. And I've also seen what he's describing as, oh my gosh, please just stop waving around and I'm just getting to an interesting point and you decide to talk to your neighbor and your shot goes to heck. And those are intensely frustrating. So it's a catch as catch can.
Go ahead, Marty.
Those of a certain age might remember the era of bootleg recordings on tape and vinyl of bands like the Grateful Dead and Fish and others. And, they would sound pretty awful because they were, a microphone in the audience. And when you have that, you're not just listening. Well, the microphone is not just hearing the loudspeakers, it's hearing the reverberation in the room and the audience noise and all of that. And that's still, even with your phones that have more intelligent audio, you still get a lot of that. But it's a really good point, because I think any band who is producing a video of a show could get really creative by incorporating some of those user videos into their video, replacing the audio with the real audio, because each of those audience members have a unique view of the stage, and some of them are actually really good. If they have their phone camera set up properly, you can get some pretty good shots.
Yeah, I think the ones of Foo Fighters is probably the best ones that I've seen out there, and that has to do with the fact that what ends up being viral are their kind of between songs and when they bring people up on stage. So people like shooting it when they bring people up on stage, I think is pretty cool. I think that if you're shooting footage that is not when they're doing something specifically different, it's just their concert, it's just kind of annoying. So I'm a big fan of bands. They don't take your phones away, but they just shame you for doing it. And I think that shaming from the stage is a pretty useful tool of just like, hey guys, let's not do that. And that's all what you'd be surprised at how quickly people will put their phones away, because what you're doing is you're basically giving the audience the permission to police itself. So there's a lot of people that are annoyed that you're picking your phone up and doing this. And if the band starts saying that's not cool, what happens is everyone around you tells you it's not cool, so you're giving them promotion. You just have everybody just put your phones down and let's just enjoy the show. I've seen a couple of bands do that really effectively, and then people are just in the show. Because the reality is 99. There's a handful of times when it's worth it, but 99% of the footage shot at a concert will never be seen again because it's absolutely unusable and horrible, and there's just no reason to shoot it. And so, especially with iPads, like at Coachella, you're like, who is carrying an iPad around at Coachella? And you'll see like 6 of them up there, and and I'm usually working something there. In times I've been there, I've been working Coachella. So you're like I'm backstage or off to some angle or in the press pit, and you're like, why are they doing that?
I wonder if they're using something like Switcher Studio, where you've got a bunch of iPads up there as cameras, and then somebody's switching on another one.
And it's the worst. It's just the worst. But
I equate that to folks that like to post videos of the fireworks they're watching on July 4th. Like they're the only person who's currently being exposed to fireworks.
Yeah, it's a painful thing to watch. So, but if you, I'm trying to think of the two to watch. By the way, if you want to see some really fun concert videos, is this Kiss guy with Foo Fighters and Nandy. I think it's Nandy Bushell. Playing with Foo Fighters. Those are probably 2 concert videos that are worth watching. I don't know very many other ones. Next question.
Yeah, Marty, don't forget the deadhead people who take it really seriously have 2 Nagras and a Deca tree out there in the middle of the audience. Anyway, Guy Cochran, Seattle, is there any way to cut a show live via voice?
I don't know of any ways. I think that Guy threw a cock run and then he's not here. He missed the ball. So I'm sure that there's something. I'm assuming something has been released that will let you cut via voice, and I don't know what it is. So anyway, but I think this is coming. If you think about what a technical director, can do for a simple show. There's no reason why you couldn't have a director just sit there and just start calling out the shows. Ready, camera 2, go camera 2. Ready, camera 3, go camera 3. An AI could totally start to figure that out. Now, the hard part is that there's a lot of other things a TD does. so there's, the reason you hire a TD is not so they can push buttons. It's because they're thinking ahead of you. They're sometimes cutting when you're not paying attention. They're doing a whole bunch of other things there that are there. So the great TDs are doing a lot more to it. Could you do a simple corporate show? Absolutely. Could you do Thursday Night Football with that? No. So I think that's the thing that you can, you just want to look at. There's probably ways to cut a show with voice where you could direct it, and that'll be great for a lot of people. We're really, AI is really going to move us to a place where people are doing what they want to do without having to necessarily know how to do it with their fingers. They're going to be able to create things, whether it's graphics or other things, as well as being able to cut things, being able to reorder things, so on and so forth. Just with their ideas. I think that's going to be pretty exciting, but it's not going to replace at the high level, the top 10%, top 5%. It's not going to replace anybody. Next question.
Art Aldrich in New York up with, I have a collection of old laptops, phones, and tablets looking for a secure disposal organization. Any recommendations?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, secure, I don't trust anybody but myself to be the secure disposal. So I will drill out hard drives. I will DoD erase drives or anything like that. You can work with your local computer stores because they're always looking for old laptops and phones, so they can grab certain parts that when they need to repair one of those, they actually have those on hand. And then of course they have these local drop-offs, usually once or twice a year for a lot of cities, where you can drop off your computers and then they get recycled properly. We actually have in one of our prison systems, we have an area where they actually tear apart the computers and pull out the gold and pull out the important parts and then properly recycle it.
And go ahead, Jason.
Best Buy, just so you know, in most states will limit you to 3 computers. I had to orchestrate an accidental mass hard drive casualty event a couple weeks ago because one of my clients is a CPA firm, and I offered to dispose of a single computer. And they said, "Oh, cool, can you get rid of the rest of them?" Every computer for 30 years, I'm not kidding, was just there. And yeah, it took the better part of an afternoon. I will never leave a hard drive in, ever. Drill it out, always. Apple, I've yet to find a limit on. So there's your answer.
Go ahead, Jeff.
If you want to get rid of them, if you just find, secure shredding services and the better ones have a truck that will come to you. So if you have enough stuff, and you have to make sure the truck is capable, but they have trucks that also can shred hard drives. And it is, by the way, very cool. And if they're the better ones where it's secure, they literally have a camera and a monitor that shows you the actual shredding. So you know that you see your hard drive drop down and get shredded. And if you have enough stuff to warrant it, I had one time finally my collection of old hard drives that didn't work but had stuff on them built up enough along with paper and stuff. I finally called the truck out. They came to me right out on the street, dumped all the paper in, and then I was like, "Are you sure?" Yeah, give me these hard drives. And they just dumped the hard drives right in, and they just come out a mangled mess.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, so destroying the hard drive, drilling through it is the best way. And anything that needs to be secured on a computer is generally on the hard drive. Whether it be an SSD drive, a spinning drive, whatever, make sure you're pulling all that memory out of the computer, and then the computer itself is just stupid, right? That said, there are programs that will securely overwrite all bits and data on the drive with hash, and that secures and scrambles any data that was previously on it because everything is being overwritten. But destroying the drive is the best process.
Yeah, and as someone who's decommissioned 1,000 drives on my own, I would highly recommend a shredder. Like I didn't even know the shredders existed for hard drives. There's one in Berkeley that's Berkeley shredding, and it's just you think of your paper shredder and then make each one of those little teeth about 10 times wider, and they just kind of churn through everything. It's pretty fun to watch. And so I'm in the process of taking a lot of paperwork over there to get rid of it. I'm a little far away from them to have them come to me, but I'm taking a whole van full of old paperwork over and just having them, and you can sit there and watch it. Same thing. I would always go to one that you can watch. Like I wouldn't go to one that you're just doing a dumb drop. That's why shred it if you're going to do a dumb drop. Like if you want to get rid of the data, take it to someone who's going to let you see it go through the system. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle's right back again with what traits are most valuable to you when choosing a team for production?
I think that attentiveness of being present, I think, is probably one of the most important things. So if I feel like someone is paying attention to other things during the show, so if I feel like they're not responsive on comms, they're checking their email, they're checking texts for other projects in front of me, means that you won't be on the show and again. Like just so you know, like it's like not a like that is a you can do it, just go somewhere else, but you have to kind of clearly not be in your seat doing whatever. If I see it, I'm just like, well, that I just write you off, and so it doesn't matter how much you know or how good you are. If I see you doing something like that. Now, some people that I know that are online all the time, but I know what they're doing is researching. Like they're doing stuff, and I can see it. They're on whatever they call it now, Gear or whatever, to do audio stuff and figure those things out. But if I see you surfing or so being present is really important. Being on time is really important. Being and then of course skill. But the skill is kind of table stakes of what you need to do. But for me to hire people over and over again, it's usually that they're on time, they're present, they are client appropriate. So just in how they talk, that means no politics, no religion, no swearing, all the things we do here. Like that's kind of also table stakes for that. I don't hire a lot of yappers. So people who yap during the production, I'll usually line you up as like, I don't need to have you work here. So yappers are problematic just because it's a distraction from what we're doing. It's not that you can't talk at all, but that's usually a problem. Go ahead, Jason.
I've only ever had to actually straight up get rid of somebody in the middle of a show once. For the most part, Alex pretty much nailed it. The one thing that I would add to that is that they need to understand how to handle themselves around talent that they may or may not think is, supremely cool. They can't lose it, if a famous person walks in. Yeah,
I've also only had to have someone I removed twice from teams out of thousands of events, and both of them they were having arguments with someone else on the team. That's usually like getting into arguments with someone else on the team and having it not be just a theoretical trying to figure it out and very calm. Anything that rises above a very calm conversation about something and understanding where you are in the food chain. So it's usually if two people are arguing and one person's a camera operator and the other person's the director, the camera operator is going to get, that's who I got rid of. The camera operator is not going to survive this one, because they're lower on the food chain than the director. So I think that those are the kind of things you do want to watch. Being argumentative on site is a pretty dangerous thing to do too. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. Peter says, Marshall Amps is being acquired by the Swedish firm Zound Industry. It's like sound, but with a Z. Any thoughts?
Go ahead, Bill.
First of all, he has a note in here that he hasn't felt well. So, Peter, get well soon. We're hoping you come back very quickly. As to the actual question, I've seen it go both ways. I've seen a long-time, highly respected brand be acquired by a larger organization, and it do really well for them. They have more resources. They can do more, hire better people. They can do a lot of things with that extra capital behind them. I've also seen it go the other way, where a classic brand has been kind of consumed by a huge thing, and they don't really care about them. In fact, they may have been a competitive acquisition to really suppress them and get them out of the competition pool. So I never really know whether it's going to be a good thing or not. It's coming back down to individual things. In this case, it's a toss-up. I hope it does really well for Marshall because they've been around a long time and they made some really good products.
Good, Marty.
Yeah, this could really go either way. Looking at the Zound Industries website, what I see is discussion of, on the Marshall brand is all consumer-oriented information, like small recreational speakers and earbuds and that kind of thing. I see very little information, maybe not even any, about musical instruments and guitar amplifiers and the professional stuff. It seems almost like they want to split off the consumer-oriented product from the professional product, and if they're going to do something different with that, and we'll have to wait and see what they do with it.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles. When renting Unity comms for a single show, if you have 12 users, should you rent the 15-user package or the 20-user package to be extra safe?
I would get the 20. So you always want to be able to add people. The reality is it's not very hard to upgrade. If you get the 15 and you need to go to 20 in the middle of the show, it takes minutes if you know how to do it. So, increasing the number isn't that big of a deal. But I would probably go ahead and get the 20 so that I just didn't have to think about it. And I knew that I'd have some headroom in that area. Comms are half the show. And you want to be always leaning towards giving people comms as opposed to saying, oh, I don't have another seat for you. I don't have another whatever you were saving by not putting that seat in. It's not going to pay off. So I think that you always want to have more people in. The key with Unity and with any other comm system is really making sure that that you are properly grouping people into the PLs that make the most sense. So when people start, they kind of put everybody on all the PLs. And that's usually not what you want to do. So you have the clients, you give them a PL, you give them, oftentimes the clients will sit on their own PL, maybe have one other PL that they're sitting on. It'll get confusing for them if they have a lot of them. And you don't necessarily want them in the raw production PL. So you want to think about where they're sitting and how they're doing it. It used to be we couldn't even make these decisions because it was like a 2-channel, and you just give them a 2-channel analog comms. But now we have some controls over that, and so you want to think about how you set those up. I try to avoid anybody not being on comms because then they sidestep the comms. They're talking to people all the time outside of the comms. They're walking over to them. You want to slowly train them. And even if it's a small job, I try to get most of our clients on the comms, even if they're not going to say anything, because what I want to do is get them to install the app, and I want them to understand how the app works. And I want them to, and every time we do an event, and you'll find that when we have a large client that now has lots of seats that we use for their events. And at first it was like, well, can we use Zoom, or can we use can we do a bridge and everything else? And the problem with the bridges is that's another thing you have to pay attention to if you can't wire it into your comms. And it's also really inefficient, and so it's really, really great to just put them on comms so that you can talk to them as needed or make an announcement or do whatever you need to do. But you keep them in there in a place that makes sense, so they're not less necessarily interacting with everybody. But a lot of times we'll have our production comms, we'll have our own internal company comms, we'll have transmission comms, we'll have client comms, talent comms. And, with Unity, we're kind of limited. You can put more, I know everyone always tells me you can put more pages in Unity, but you can only have 6 PLs, per page, which is painfully limiting. And so that's where we try to limit most of our stuff to 6 PLs just because of the limitations inside of Unity for that thing. When you go to something like ClearComm, you can have 24 keys on your iPad, and it just doesn't matter. Like they can be PLs or directs. So it's a lot smoother to do it that way. But Unity, but if you're using Unity, that's the way I would look at it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has one for Marty. Marty, you mentioned that an iPhone camera that is, quote, set up properly can produce very good images. How does one set it up properly, and do you use an app like FiLMiC Pro?
Go ahead, Marty.
Well, I'm an Android user, and I'm using currently a Samsung Galaxy S22 Plus Ultra, the biggest one. And I'm the kind of guy that, when I get these things, I'll go through the menus thoroughly and look and see what capabilities they have and what I can adjust. And, on a lot of these phones, you can adjust how the sensor works, whether it's working on for exposure, whether it's working on a matrix of dots across the screen, or center weighted or center spot. But there's also the ability to change from just standard video to what they call pro video, which opens up all of the adjustments that you would have in an SLR camera. You can adjust the ISO, you can adjust the f-stop, you can adjust the zoom, you can adjust many different parameters about how the camera and the sensor is picking up video. And I find when I'm going to a concert and trying to either shoot stills or shoot video, that I get much better results if I go into manual mode or pro video mode. Set the ISO, set the f-stop down, darken the area, and that way I don't get the center bloom off of the faces that always happens when I'm shooting in automated mode. So get much more control over the video, and you can get better images.
Go ahead, Bill.
I've had a lot of good success with FiLMiC Pro. Unfortunately, about, I guess it was 6-7 months ago, I might be wrong about the timing, they got bought. And they moved from the traditional model they were on before to an all-subscription model. The thing I loved about the software is that it had better audio channel addressing, and I could use it with my phone in a rig with my wireless mic system. And it was the only software that continuously was able to get that second channel audio onto my files through a wireless system. But with the subscription thing and the fact that I'm not sure that which direction the development's going, I've been moving away from it. So just take that as a grain of salt.
On the iPhone, of course, none of us were super excited about the fact that FiLMiC went to a different price model, but there's nothing else like it. Like just so you know, if you're on the iPhone, I've tried, when FiLMiC went to subscription, I went, well, I'm going to look at all these other apps, and I open them all up and I play with them all, and they've really carved out a niche for themselves. Where a lot of the tools that are there are pretty specific and really well developed, and they've been used by a lot of people. And I don't know anybody doing pro, and I know that sounds crazy to say pro level work on their iPhone, but there are a lot of people that do pro level work on their iPhone, that do it for clients and so on and so forth, or they do it. And I don't know anybody using anything other than FiLMiC when they're doing records. Now there's Shoot, which is Michael Forrest, Square's TV makes. That's great for live. It's got telestrators. It's got all kinds of things built into it. That's a different, to me, that those two things belong on the same phone. Shoot is doing one thing, but FiLMiC has a pedigree and a history of interaction with professional filmmakers that the highest end people who are doing stuff with an iPhone. And I haven't seen anybody get close to what they're doing, so I keep paying the subscription. So anyway, next question.
Next question comes from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. My sound system has a severe white noise through the system. Sound check was fine. After the event, the only thing I could find was a dead battery in a C1000 mic. Could that mess up the whole system, even if that channel was muted?
Go ahead, Marty.
No, not likely. I don't think so. So there are two things I would pay attention to. First is that sound check was fine. And then if you had noise during the show, that means that something changed. And the fact that it's white noise throughout the system and not particular to any input channel means that there's something that's flooding the system. So white noise can often be associated with stray RF. That's getting in. So like wireless microphones or something like that can also be introduced through ground problems from guitar amplifiers, things like that. So first look for something that changed between sound check and show. Somebody may have turned something on nearby. And then it's not an easy thing to track down, but you've got to think through the problem logically and try and isolate what it could be.
Jeffrey, real quick.
I will go towards the soundboard. I have the QSC Touch Mix, and the one big problem with that is the capacitors start to go, and you could have a perfect sound check, but then all of a sudden everything starts to run, and then the capacitors start to lose their power. You end up pushing up the gain on them, and then you can get a whole bunch of white noise coming through. Like I said, I had this problem already, had to go on the board and actually change out those capacitors. So don't discount the board, but that's an extreme last measure.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. I read the FCC in the U.S. has fined broadcasters for the use of the emergency alert system's tones. Fox as one example. How can the use of two audio tones or a combination of them be deemed illegal? Is there a similar problem in other parts of the world?
Go ahead, Marty.
So what they're doing is they're using a combination of two specific tones that when played will trigger devices in the signal chain that will turn on the emergency alert system automatically. So very much like touch tones on a telephone, every number is a combination of two tones that signals a digit, right, for dialing. So they're doing something very similar. Every radio station, every television station have equipment in their transmission chain that will turn on the emergency alert, video screens and audio announcements, interrupt programming, and they're triggered by these two tones that are sent out by the FCC. And so, yeah, using them in any other way could be problematic.
Go, Jeff.
And to be clear, the emergency alert system is, as Marty described, a very specific thing that is meant to notify people that there is a genuine emergency taking place of some sort. This was used in an ad, so they used that in an advertisement, having nothing to do with an actual emergency. That's where the problem is. They can use the tone if there's actually an emergency, but not in an ad. It's like yelling fire, in a crowded room.
All right, we are jumping to our second hour. We're very excited to have Glenn Sanders here from Zaxcom. Hey, Glenn, how you doing? Can you hear us okay? Nope, can't hear you there.
Okay, how about now?
We can hear you just great now. Thank you.
Cool. Hi.
Hi, welcome to Office Hours. Good to see you here.
Thank you, Lizzie. Great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about, we'd like to get a little of the history. Like, how did this all get started? How did you decide to start Zaxcom? Where did it begin?
Well, it all began when I worked in post-production, television post-production. And I kind of knew I wanted to do my own thing. And I wanted to make a product that would certainly sell and be accepted and profitable. So I invented something called the time-based corrector control system, which went along with the line of work I was doing at the time.
Now what did that change from what you had? What was in the industry before?
In the industry, if you wanted to remote the settings of a time-based corrector, which basically is used to set the video settings for playback of an analog videotape, it's something that controls gain, setup, chroma level, and hue, as well as timing settings. And the problem was that when people would change videotapes on a recorder, they had to set up the tape every time, and there was no way to memorize those settings. I mean, you could have 20 tapes and maybe 3 or 4 tape machines, so you were constantly changing tapes, and every time it was a process to go to the color bars on the tape and set the tape up. So what I did was I built a system that would allow remote control from an edit room of a remoted tape machine and time-based corrector, and would memorize those settings. And it would allow you to take a multitude of edit rooms and control any number of tape machines that were wired to or routed to that room. And for that, I won one of the Emmys that are sitting behind me, because that was a pretty big deal. So that then ended up being the starting point where I then made digital audio mixers for television post-production. And then when Avid came in and I saw that basically that was going to go away, I decided that I wanted to make an audio recorder for film and television, because I felt that the current recorders of the day, which were the analog Nagra and DAT machines, were not ideal by any means, and it was time for.
They're pretty big. They're pretty large. You know, they were.
They're large. They're heavy. The audio quality was not great. I felt that we could bring so much more to it. When we invented the Deva, which was the first multi-track production recorder, we added metadata to the files. We came up with a file format by adapting WAV files. We invented something called pre-record, which allowed 10 seconds of audio to be recorded before you press the record key with timecode reference. That I don't think a lot of people realize, but we invented that. And, basically just converted the world from basically analog tape-based recording to digital nonlinear recording. Just the fact that people didn't have to change reels every 20 minutes or rewind tapes, or if you check a tape, then you might re-record over something if you don't shuttle it back to the end of where you were recording. I mean, all these problems were eliminated. And we also increased the audio quality from the best they had was 16-bit audio on a DAT, which wasn't great. And all of a sudden, we're putting out a recorder with an extra 20 dB of dynamic range, with 4 tracks, which was the first Deva. It was all pretty mind-blowing to the community.
And what did it take to design those? Like, so you're building something that no one's else built before. How do you even build that pipeline? Because you're coming from you were you worked in this industry, and then you have to start developing these things. What did it take to actually design and build the hardware?
Well, I worked in the video part of the business mostly,
right.
But I certainly saw the need for a nonlinear digital system. And the first thing it took was we had to write our own file system, because FAT16, which was the file system of the day, everyone said, oh, it's not going to work, you're going to lose audio. And they were right. It wasn't going to work because, if you had a problem in FAT16, you lose the file. You don't lose just a little bit of audio. So we ended up making our own file system called the Mobile Audio Recording Format, or MARF for short, which is a terrible name, but okay. But we did this, and we embedded the directory in the audio files. So even to this day, if you're recording audio and let's say you lost power, something happened to the media, whatever it is, then you can automatically, when the machine powers up again, it sees the open file, automatically closes it, and you're ready to go, and you haven't lost any audio. Right. Where, again, today, even, with a regular file system, you can lose the take, you can lose the whole media. Right. The MARF system made it all possible. Also what we did is we made a very small, power efficient, high quality recorder. If I knew you were going to ask, I would have brought the original Deva up here. We still have one, one or two anyway. But it was tough to do. It took a year or two to design it and figure it out. And the biggest problem was the media, because what media are you going to use, and how is post-production going to play it back?
Right.
What we had to do is we had to take the Deva and write software for it to chase time code and act like a linear tape. So right. You could plug it into the telecine controller and get the audio back. Right. The other thing we had to do.
And they were playing the audio back from your recorder, right? They were
playing it back from our recorder. But what we had to do, besides having it play from the original disc, is we needed a second media. The Deva, and this is something we invented, was the first field recorder to record on 2 medias at one time. So we chose DVD RAM because the format just became available when we came up with the Deva, which was 1997 or so. So we chose DVD RAM because Panasonic had just come up with it. And actually, they're in Secaucus, New Jersey. We're in New Jersey. So I was able to get the head of the product line and say, hey, we have this application for film and television. Can we get a drive? And they actually gave us a drive before they even put it out to the public. And we were able to integrate it into the Deva. So DVD RAM for many years became the standard for delivery of film and television audio.
And was that a portable storage device? So that's something that you could record to and hand to someone, or is it still something that was installed into the machine?
Well, the disc was a DVD. So
right.
The drive itself was actually a computer-esque drive. Basically, one of the drives that are like this big that goes in your PC or Mac of the day, or actually not Mac, but PC of the day. Mm-hmm. So it was like an outboard DVD recorder. And, luckily it was, the drives and the media were robust enough to make that work. So, putting all this together allowed us to transition the industry from the older medias to file-based digital recording. Of course, after we pioneered it, it got easier because, drives got bigger, and then there was solid-state media like SD and compact flash, and it got easy for everyone. But we were the pioneers of all of that.
Has it been amazing? I just have to ask: has it been amazing to watch storage change so dramatically? I mean, for you, I mean, you because you were really in the trenches dealing with this from day one. I'm always amazed. I have this key here. This little key has got a terabyte on it. So it's just an amazing progression.
The first hard drives we bought for the Deva were 700 megabytes.
Yeah.
Not even 1 gig. I mean, and luckily we're only recording 4 tracks of audio, so you could easily get all your audio for a day on it. But today that wouldn't work at all.
Yeah.
It's amazing, how it's progressed, and we've had to keep up with all of that, and we have, and that's cool.
So what came after the Deva? Where did you go from there?
Well, basically, after recording, I wanted to turn our attention to wireless microphones because, in looking around at what microphones were available, I mean,
And what year was this when you did that?
This was around the year 2000.
Right.
So, I decided I wanted to make a digital transmission wireless microphone, which, of course, every manufacturer of the day said could not be done. Impossible. You can't do it. And I just, as we usually do, said, well, you know what? We're going to make it work somehow. So, we set off to design a digital transmission wireless microphone. We had to figure it all out from scratch.
What makes digital transmission so hard?
Well, you have to ask the question in terms of what made it hard in the year 2000.
Exactly.
Basically, power consumption of the ICs required, the physical size of the transmitter that you could have, fitting enough data into the channel, which is FCC limited to 200 kilohertz. It's, I kind of look at it, the problem like a balloon. If you push on the balloon on one side, it's going to bulge on the other.
Right.
So you've got to figure out how to get all these parameters of RF bandwidth, power consumption, transmitter size, battery size, audio quality, if I didn't say that. You have to figure out how to get all these things to be just right. And, while that was true 23 years ago,
right, it
is still very true today.
It's even gotten harder in some ways because they took a bunch of our frequencies away. Not that I'm bitter.
Well, that's not, I wouldn't say that's not what makes it hard.
Okay.
What makes it hard is that, here's our most popular transmitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to talk about this later, but what's hard is here you have something, this is the size of a Zippo lighter.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking for something to compare it to, maybe my glasses. I mean, it's just absolutely tiny.
Yeah.
And this runs for 7 hours on a single charge at full power of 50 milliwatts. I mean, that's the trick. And, you can't, no one wants a big transmitter. No one wants a transmitter that doesn't run long enough.
Right.
And, the problem today of trying to get, all those parameters to be as tight as possible, size, battery life, transmit power, audio quality, that's the key. And I think that's where, no one has done what we have done even today. Any competitor can't do this.
And they're very durable. It's not just that they're like, I've actually taped your transmitters onto shoulder pads. so
awesome.
For big games. And so
now I know your background. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, it's, like I say, it's tough. And this, to top it off, it records internally, remote controllable, and has 48 volt phantom power.
Right.
So there's just nothing anyone makes that can do what this does.
Right. So you moved into digital production or digital transmission, and where did it go from there?
Well, we did that, and just doing that didn't get us a lot of customers. Mm-hmm. We had to take a look at it and say, okay, what do we have to do to really change this industry?
Right.
Because people tend to be happy with what they've purchased. Because if you've gone out and spent, you know, $20, $30, $40,000 on a whole bunch of analog companded wireless, and
Right.
someone shows you a digital transmitter, you're not going to go out and change over immediately. You're going to take your time, see how it goes for other people.
Right.
So what I decided to do was to take the transmitter and add some very special features. We added internal recording with a memory card that is easily removable. We added remote control that we could access from a very, very long distance. And we added an internal timecode generator with RF transmission of it, so that all you have to do is literally turn the transmitter on and it jams its own code. So there's no jamming with cables.
Right.
So putting all that together allowed us to come up with something that was just an undeniable advance in the art of wireless microphones. And of course, all of that with audio quality that is, you know, absolutely as close to a hard wire as you could possibly get, because it's all digital transmission.
Yeah. No,
so
absolutely.
that's where we went. And you know, where we're going from here, you'll have to wait and see.
Well, you and your latest release is the Nova, is that right? Is that?
Well, our latest recorder is the Nova. I mean, Nova is about three years old at this point.
Right.
And I mean, Nova's terrific. I mean, what Nova does that no one does is, you know, here you've got a recorder that's about 4 pounds, and the receivers fit into the recorder. So
right. So usually for those listening, you have your recorder, and then you've got a bunch of receivers that are all in your bag. You've got a big recorder, and then you've got a bunch of receivers that are all kind of lined up along on the outside of that, and then they're all feeding into that recorder. And in yours, that is directly, it's the receivers are actually in the recorder. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah, the receiver's in it. I mean, I could pull it out.
And how many channels do those receivers pick up?
This receiver receives 4 separate transmitters. So you can actually receive 8 channels of wireless within the recorder. Right. So literally this, or maybe this and an IFB transmitter is all you need in your sound bag. And in fact, this does output IFB audio on 2.4 gigahertz to one of our receivers. So let me just put the gear down here. It's a little unwieldy. But with us, the thing is, you know, you've got a sound bag that weighs roughly 6 pounds.
Right.
That is half the size, less than half the weight of, you know, other typical bags, and power consumption wise draws half to a third the power. So, you know, if you look at competitive systems, you know, you can walk around with a 16 to 20 pound sound bag, and that doesn't do what our 6 pound sound bag does in terms of performance and integration and what have you. So, you know, I think we're leading in the sound bag area when it comes to the ergonomics and usability.
And where are you going next? Can you give us any hints?
Well, NAB is only about a week away, so you know, you'll have to wait and see.
Do you have some new stuff for NAB?
We do have new stuff for NAB.
Great,
yeah.
Great. Well, we'll stop by. We're covering NAB in detail. So
we'll be happy to show you at that time the big new thing for the show. So the only thing I can tell you is there's a big new thing.
Excellent. Well, that's what we'll make sure to put you on the list of must visit if you're releasing something new. Now, where do you see this industry going? Like, not so much with your products, but when you're looking out into the future, what do you think are the key challenges and opportunities that are out there?
Well, you know, I think going forward, there's always going to be the ability to make smaller gear, lighter gear, lower power gear. I think going forward, a lot of the challenges in terms of deliveries, that's where things are at. I think, if you can get audio files to someone on, a physical piece of media, that's great. But of course, everyone wants to just hit the stop button and have the files end up on a server somewhere that anyone in the world can see it. So I would say it's the integration with, Wi-Fi and the internet and, the world around us that, we have to realize that, a sound mixer is no longer, quote unquote, off the grid. When you're on set, even when you're working in a sound bag, if you're working for a TV network or whatever, I mean, whether it's the evening news or, a 60 Minutes kind of show, people want to hear the audio files and see the picture literally the moment it's done. I mean, even to the point where if everyone is still, on set, sitting in their chairs, that someone can just call in and say, hey, you didn't ask them this question, ask them this question while they're still there. So, I would say, it's so much about what we're doing right now, which is communication.
Are you doing any of the camera to cloud integrations right now?
Not at the moment. I would certainly say to you, future plans are happening. So I don't want to talk too much about what we're.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've been experimenting with it, and it is kind of revolutionary when you're there and you're sitting there, and someone can be downloading something. In our case, in Frame.io, they're sitting there looking at something that we shot. Like we close the camera, and they have it seconds later, and they're sitting there talking to us about, hey, can we take one more take with a little closer to the hands, or can we do a little bit of this? And it's both a little bit nerve-wracking because you have a producer or a director or editor asking you things while you're trying to shoot. But at the same time, you've got the whole set there, you've got all the people there, you don't have to do another build-up, and they're getting exactly what they want. So it's a really interesting puzzle. So sure. For our online audience, we're going to get to your questions here in a second. So if you've got questions for Glenn, make sure to go ahead and throw those into Makana. And we're going to go ahead and throw it to a couple of our panelists for questions before we get to the online audience. Go ahead, Marty.
Hey, Glenn. Welcome to Office Hours. So in the 1990s, I was doing electronic news gathering for the networks in Washington, D.C., right? So we're all over town doing live shots and interviews and stuff. And as the audio guy, I had this, mixer bag on my shoulder, and I had a wiring harness that went from my mixer to the camera that carried 2 channels of audio to the camera, and then audio coming back from the camera. And then when we're doing live shots, we had to give the on-camera talent an IFB and be able to feed them IFB. And Zaxcom had a couple of innovations in wireless that completely revolutionized that. Can you talk about what you did?
Sure. Basically, what we did is we invented the 2-channel digital audio link, where you're able to put the transmitter, which I have right here, coincidentally. You're able to put this transmitter in your sound bag, and you're able to send a digital 2-channel link to the camera. And this also has our Zaxnet output at 2.4 gigahertz that works with our IFB receivers. So we basically transformed that market from companded FM wireless to a 2-channel, again, like a hardwire kind of transmission to the camera. So that worked out really well. We still sell quite a few of those today. We've been in IFB for a long time. Our first IFB was receiving our Zaxnet signal, which I should probably elaborate on for a moment. Our recorders transmit this signal we call Zaxnet. And Zaxnet is a system where on one RF transmission, we put time code, wireless remote control, and IFB audio. So you get all of this functionality coming out of the recorder, without a separate transmitter, from the sound bag. So it just gave a functionality to the system that was just amazing. In fact, with Zaxnet, when you control the gain of the transmitter, you're doing it through the recorder. So you're able to actually put it up on a knob on the recorder, actually hit one button, and tweak the transmitter's gain right from the recorder in the bag. And even today, nobody does that. So that's kind of along the lines of what we were doing back when we came up with that system.
And so the person on camera actually needs just one belt pack for both microphone transmission and IFB receive.
We did have a pack like that. We're not offering that at this time, but back in the day, yes, we did. Today, you would have your wireless microphone and you would have your IFB pack.
And by the way, for those listening who don't do a lot of this, being able to change the gain at the receiver level or at the transmitter level is a big deal, because we would get into gain stage issues, where it's not high enough or it's too high, and then we're trying to correct for it on the receiving end, and it was never as good as being able to change what the transmitter's doing. Go ahead.
What I'd like to say about that is we just ran tests against systems that don't control the gain. And we, set up a very scientific test with an audio generator and audio precision. And what we found was being able to control the gain of the transmitter to the point where, you've got a proper level coming out of the transmitter versus not controlling transmitter gain and trying to correct for it down stage or down the line. We achieved 5 to 6 dB lower noise floor.
Yep.
By changing the gain of the transmitter. It's an essential thing. I mean, you've got to be able to properly match the preamp to the A to D in the transmitter. Otherwise, you're leaving dynamic range on the table. It is just that simple. There's no system that can achieve the same audio quality as a system that allows you to control the mic gain of the transmitter.
Yeah, 100%. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, first of all, I'll reiterate the thanks and appreciation for you being here and joining us. Field recording is not in my wheelhouse, but some of the benefits seem obvious with that recorder, the Nova, especially having the receivers built in. I assume you can also use external receivers and feed them in. Is that right? And then I guess my question is, what are there considerations when deciding, do I just, aside from if you need more, but in other words, is the performance of the internal ones the same or the distance as an external? Or so there are considerations when deciding, do you just use the internals versus external receivers?
Right. There's no limitation on being able to connect external receivers. They can be Zaxcom, they can be receivers from other manufacturers. The recorder has a number of analog inputs and AES inputs. So the 8 internal receivers are certainly enough for literally any kind of bag job that you would do. But we do have people that are putting Novas on carts, hooking them to our external mixing consoles. So if you wanted to, let's say, go up to 16 channels of receiver, we offer this guy. This is called an RX8. And an RX8 actually has 2 slots, which are currently empty, but it has 2 slots. So you can plug in the same receiver that plugs into the Nova. So what you're doing is you're getting a lot of value out of your system, because you've got these 4-channel modules, and if they're plugged into the Nova, fine, they can plug into the RX8. We've got a little standalone adapter that allows you to use it as a 4-channel receiver. And we've got something called the RX12 that actually would handle 6 modules for 24 channels of audio. So, I think the way we look at it is when someone buys our wireless, what we want to do is we want to provide the maximum value that we can. So by having this flexibility of the modules and putting them where you need them, or maybe even where you want to rent them out separately, It's something that every sound mixer can get the best return for their investment in a system that is modular, flexible, and frankly, audio or RF transmission and reliability is not sacrificed by having the module in one place or another. I mean, if it's in the Nova with whip antennas, you're going to get, very, very good range and performance. Of course, conditions have to be observed. I mean, if you're in the middle of Times Square, it's going to be less than if you're in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa. But, when you take it and put it into something like the RX-8, and maybe you're on a sound cart with log periodic antennas that are raised up 8 or 10 feet in the air, you're going to double or triple the range you might have from a sound bag with whips. So everything is dependent upon conditions, but there's no penalty for using the receiver in one place or another. It's always going to give you very, very good results. I mean, people get tripped up sometimes. Like for a while, people were using these power distribution boxes and sound bags that had switching power supplies to make USB power. And those were just radiating stray RF all over the place. And when that happens, they would say, hey, why is my range only like 50 feet or 30 feet? It's like, well, because you've raised the noise floor by putting interfering devices.
And what were those? What were the USB devices that were doing this?
They were power distribution boxes that some of the companies that are making them got clever about and said, hey, we're going to put a 5-volt USB jack in there so you can power your USB stuff. Right. And they put a switching power supply in to go from 12 volts to 5 volts.
Right.
And they didn't do any kind of RF protection. And, you got a big square wave generator in there for those that understand what all that's about. And, square waves just emanate harmonics and stray RF all over the place. So,
right.
Again, conditions are everything when it comes to RF, just everything.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah. So just for those who don't do a lot of field recording, have to remember that you're personally mobile and you're moving around. So everything you carry, every piece of equipment has to be battery powered. And so if you have 6 different devices in your sound bag that you're carrying across your chest, each one of those could have its own battery, or you can have a central battery, a large battery that and a distribution system that can then power all devices. So you just have one battery to change. And then that distribution device, as Glenn was saying, is critical, not only for the operation, but for the noise floor and for protection. But Glenn, you mentioned a couple of things about antennas that I think are often overlooked in the signal chain as being very important devices. Can you talk to us a little bit about your antennas and why you're doing what you're doing with them?
Sure. I mean, primarily, we don't offer a lot of antennas. I mean, when it comes to things in a sound bag, there's not a lot of choices because basically it's a whip antenna or almost nothing. I mean, there are a few other solutions that are what are called bow tie antennas in the industry, and people have given them fancy names. They're basically just wideband dipoles. A whip antenna is effectively going to be the same kind of thing as a dipole. A dipole being just 2 wires like this, but actually you stand them up. Sorry for the bad graphics, but in any case, so. Really, in my book, there's two options. There's whip antennas or analogs of that, whether they be dipoles or bow ties. But for the most part, if you want the best results, you use a log periodic antenna. The reason we use log periodics is because they'll give us a forward gain of about 9 dB, 8 to 9 dB. And we make those. I don't have one handy to show, but I think we all pretty much know what a shark fin looks like. So with its 9 dB of forward gain, that doubles the distance, literally doubles the distance. So that's a great thing. But what it does that is also an extreme benefit is it minimizes interference from the directions that you're not pointed. So, for instance, if you were to have an interferer behind you or to the sides of you, you might get 9 to 18 dB of attenuation of that interfering signal. Well, if you can do that, if you got 9 dB of gain and 9 dB of attenuation, there you go. There's thank you, Marty. There's a screenshot there. If you have that, you've got 18 dB better signal to noise on the RF. That's huge. I mean, I do understand you can't do that, walking around with a sound bag. But then again, with a sound bag, you're not typically 100 feet from the action. You're probably 10, 20 feet away from what's going on. You don't need anything like that typically. But when it comes to, being able to use something like a shark fin antenna, if you can, you always should. It's that important, and so much more important than a lot of other of the quote unquote options that you have.
That's great. Now we're going to go ahead and open it to our producers, our online viewers. So let's go ahead to the first question.
Our first one comes from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. And Roscoe asks, what's the runtime on your LA5 transmitter using 2 Procell AA batteries? And he wonders, why did you choose to use AA batteries to power your units?
Okay. Basically, on that transmitter, I believe with, Procells are alkaline batteries, I believe. We don't generally recommend them. I think you get about 5 hours out of that. What we recommend on the LA5 is nickel metal hydride rechargeables. And the reason that we went with that is because that's what the industry demands. Everyone wants to know if in an emergency, you can just go to the supermarket or whatever and get batteries and put them in and they're going to work. So there's still a big need for that. I mean, when it comes to our transmitters, we actually have a few alternatives. But just to first finish off the question. So yeah, about 8 hours on those rechargeable batteries, which I think is quite good. And frankly, I'm very proud that, number one, we're not generating the waste, which the world needs to generate less waste on that. And the cost to run it is, virtually zero, because if you're going to have rechargeable batteries, maybe it's going to cost you 10 cents every time you run it. So that's all good. On our smallest transmitter, just talking about batteries, we use the NP50 battery, and this will run this transmitter for 7 hours, full time, full power at 50 milliwatts, which is actually kind of a ridiculous number. Again, comparatively, it's just out of the ballpark in terms of where all the other kind of transmitters from our competitors are. The other thing that's interesting about batteries and battery life is this generates no heat because it's so power efficient. You could have it in someone's pocket all day long and it is just not going to get hot. And that's a big consideration when it comes to transmitters. I mean, you just can't put hot transmitters on people. They won't accept it. And then
Oh, go ahead.
And lastly, I don't know if it has a battery in it. Let's see. No battery. But I wasn't prepared for that question. But this runs off of a little Motorola battery that powers their walkie-talkies. And, it also, AA's are great in terms of being able to get them, but they're not great in terms of building a small transmitter, because you really need 2 batteries to get any kind of life out of a transmitter. So, I'm sorry. Here's the there's the Motorola battery right there. Didn't realize I had one on my desk.
That's great.
So, these kind of batteries are lithium, rechargeable. And of course, AA batteries, come in all flavors. But the one thing I'll mention about AA is I don't know if anyone's noticed, but the cost of them for lithium has gone crazy. We just bought a couple batteries the other day, and for literally AAA lithium batteries, they're just about $5 each.
Wow.
Which makes and especially if you have a transmitter that uses them, having to because they're small, they don't have much energy. Going through 3 or 4 sets a day is just a kind of a showstopper. So anyway, that's kind of our battery thing.
That's great. That's great.
I'll just add that this. Sorry to be too much of a rolling advertisement here.
No, it's great. This
runs for 16 hours on this battery at full power.
Great. Yeah.
So pretty nice.
A day. Like a day. That's the key is getting to a day.
No, you wouldn't have to change. It's amazing.
That's fantastic. And does it give you feedback on exactly where it is in the battery? I mean, is it pretty accurate as far as that feedback goes?
Yes. There's telemetry that'll tell you the battery level, and you can read that right out on the recorder. It shows up. It shows up in our receiver page.
That's great.
And actually, when the battery goes low in the transmitter, there's a ring of LEDs. I don't have it lit up here, but there's a ring of LEDs around the knobs. And when the battery on the transmitter goes low, the knob begins to flash.
Oh, that's great.
So okay, you have to do something.
Right. No, that's great.
Yeah. No one likes a dead battery.
No one, it is a range anxiety is a huge thing. Like batteries in my, especially in live, we're worried about batteries all the time. Like I just, think about them all the time, is what's charged, what isn't, where are we on our scale?
Yeah.
So.
You just brought up something, but you said it in a term that isn't quite the term I recognize it as.
Yeah.
You talked about range anxiety.
Yeah.
And I'd like to speak for a moment if I can. I'll try to keep it brief.
Absolutely. No. Please do.
When it comes to transmission range, that's something that we really struggled with when we invented digital wireless, because certainly we had to absolutely get range that was not only comparable to analog, but would certainly be more than good enough for any production situation. And there's one thing that we did that I think just works so well today, especially in terms of what's in the marketplace, is we made sure that our wireless not only had great range, but had the ability to quickly achieve lock on the transmitter. Right. Meaning that the moment you switch a transmitter on, we didn't want the receiver to have to take time to figure out what that signal was and to log onto it. So literally our lock time is literally a millisecond. And the thing that I find interesting is, there's a lot of talk in the industry about range anxiety. And, when we ran some tests recently, what we found was our system, in terms of non-line of sight, because everyone that uses a wireless understands that often you can't have a clear path between the receiver and the transmitter. So what you've got is multipath. And our system handles multipath situations incredibly well, where if the signal were to have a problem, it's going to be able to stay locked longer than anything else on the marketplace. And if it, for some reason, takes an RF hit, it literally would be a millisecond or two and would be covered by what's called our dropout compensator. So I just want to say that, you asked before what made Deva something that, we could put out and change the world. Our modulations and their ability to maintain lock of the signal, that's important, because when someone says we've got the best range or what have you, that's fine. But do you have the best signal reliability? in terms of being able to work within a fixed area and with any kind of multipath or something that's going to interfere with the signal in terms of, the signal getting from point A to point B.
Right.
That's where we really, really excel. So signal integrity, I'm not talking about range, I'm talking about integrity is something that I think we really excel at, and people need to be aware.
And I know for us, we don't pay attention to anybody's numbers. We get the transmitters, and we start walking around. we try to put them through as many stress tests as possible. And just we want to how many walls can it go through? How much steel can it go through? How much can like all of those things, and then distance as well. But published numbers don't mean anything to us.
I think you're right on the money, Alex.
Yeah. Next question.
Mickey Makachor in Manila in the Philippines is up next with, can you talk about the development process of coming from Rado Stefanov's revolutionary OneUnit to what is now the Nova?
Okay. Well, what Rado called his OneUnit was a Nomad that he repackaged. So he took our stock recorder called the Nomad, which is out of production now, and he was able to basically take the case. I mean, I'm not 100% familiar with everything he did, but he was able to incorporate our QRX receivers, which are these receivers here, which are two-channel, two-transmitter standalone receivers, and basically incorporate that into the Nomad in something that was, I believe, slightly bigger than the original Nomad itself. So, certainly, Rado's OneUnit was a bit inspirational, and we said, okay, this makes sense. And, Rado was always saying, he had some back injury or something at one point and didn't want to carry around a heavy sound bag. So he did everything he could do to get that bag to be as light as possible. And I just said to him, you know what, we're going to make a new recorder. I'll put the receivers inside. I'll put the IFB inside. I will make it as low power as possible. And what we ended up with was the Nova is a 4-pound recorder, including the receivers. And this is unheard of. Just for comparison, if you look at the Nova in a sound bag, it's about 6 pounds. If you look at the equivalent competitive bag, it's basically 16 to 25 pounds, depending upon how you outfit it. So, Rado was certainly inspirational in terms of looking at what he wanted. And, I don't think anyone is going to tell you that a lighter sound bag is a better idea, or not tell you that. I mean, obviously, if it could weigh 2 pounds, we would like that. But having a smaller bag, a lighter bag, a lower power bag, these are all common sense things. And Rado was just an illustration of how happy someone could be that achieved that.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next with, do you supply an SDK, software development kit, or extensions to allow MARF data to be read by a desktop operating system?
We have a program called Zaxconvert. And Zaxconvert reads MARF, and it will take in the MARF, and it will generate WAV files, and it will also generate MP3s. So there's no software developer kit needed. We did recently supply code to, I'm drawing a blank on it. One of the, they're going to kill me too. It's an Italian company that does file conversion in the cloud, and you could upload your MARF to them, and they will do it and send it off to a transcription house or what have you. So I want to say Ivanica.
I feel bad because I also know what you're talking about. I can't think of
the
name right now. We've
nice.
Actually talked about it in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe someone will Google it real quick, and because I like to
cloud.
Viviana. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Thank you. they're great people, and I know their product is well received, and we're happy to do that. But no, there's no software developer kit. If someone wants to incorporate MARF conversion into something they have, they can contact us directly, as they did at Vivianica. And if we can help them out, we would like to do that. We certainly have, we want to make sure MARF is compatible with everything that it can be. But again, as far as the users go, ZaxConvert will handle all their needs.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What's the difference between 32-bit float audio recording and NeverClip recording?
Okay. NeverClip is actually something that we invented and patented, which uses two A to D converters to maximize dynamic range. And I mean, that's the short answer. So it's not actually actually comparable to 32-bit recording, because it generates a high dynamic range 24-bit fixed point file that is just a greater dynamic range that you would have without the NeverClip dual A to D converter system. Once you generate that data, you can then take that 24-bit, and if you want to convert it to 32-bit float, you can do that. I have to be real honest that I'm not a big proponent of 32-bit float audio in audio acquisition. I think 32-bit audio is sort of advertising fluff when it comes to the use of it in recording, because a 24-bit fixed point audio file has 144 dB dynamic range. We can't generate that much. I mean, our maximum dynamic range is 136. So we fit into the audio file everything we need to fit. And in fact, we have something called ISO attenuation that actually will give you extra dynamic range in the fixed point file by basically taking the noise bits that are at the bottom and shifting the audio down to use those bits effectively. So when it comes to acquisition, there is zero reason to use 32-bit floating point for acquisition. In fact, it certainly takes up more data space than a 24-bit fixed point file with zero benefit. Of course, in post-production, absolutely bring that fixed point file into your post system, and you're going to be tweaking that all over the place and generate a 32-bit file. But don't force 32-bit recording on people. There's just no benefit to it. And you know what? If everything started that way and there was compatibility with all the systems, maybe, but I don't need to create problems for people.
Next question.
Next one comes from Mickey Makachor, who also, by the way, fed me that Viviana answer. Mickey in the Philippines says, don't mean to be a Dante diva, but when will the Deva have Dante natively? Would MRX modules with Dante instead of RF be a possibility?
Okay. So there won't be any, there's no Dante for the current Devas, certainly. We are Dante fluent. There is Dante in the RX8 receiver. Any new receiver, multi-track receiver that we come out with will have Dante, and any higher track count recorders we come out with, if we come out with them. I'm not saying we will. I'm not saying we won't. People try to read stuff into that. It'll all have Dante going forward. It's something that is, definitely appropriate, and we're Dante believers.
I think it takes a long time. It's what I find interesting is that, coming from an event, a company, we've done work on a lot of events. Dante has been the thing that we use for a decade. We don't think about anything else, but it is something in the broadcast area that's grown much slower. In that process, we're still running into people with Matty. So
yeah, no, it's true. we were slow to get into it because I didn't see the need to have Dante connect, the recorder on the cart to the receivers to save a couple of wires. Because also Dante, Dante certainly has to be set up. It's a great system, but it doesn't beat the reliability of AES on a wire that you switch on the unit and it's there. But if you're trying to get a lot of channels over a great distance, you can't beat it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question.
Stefan Fischer out of Würzburg, Germany is up next. What made you stop building the all-in-one body pack with IFB and microphone signal in one unit? It seems to be so valuable for so many cases.
That's a good question. That unit, I like that unit. It was a little big, but the battery went obsolete on us. And I really felt that we wanted to concentrate on separate IFB and transmitters to be a little bit more flexible, and we might get back to that. It wasn't a tremendous market. The problem that we have today is we have so many products in development that, are much more lucrative in terms of the number we would sell, that it would be tough for us to get back to that. And, look, that product was one of my favorites because I thought it was pretty cool and no one else ever did it and no one has at this point. But I'm fond of it and I won't rule it out going forward.
I have to say we use the, I think Shure has a, it's not the same, it's not something we would use at the same production level, but in the corporate world, they have, they have a version that has the headphone and, both sides IFB as well as mic. And it's really addicting. And you just wish that you saw it in more places. I definitely would use it a lot because it's just for us complexity. It really reduces complexity for our hosts.
Yeah, let me just say that I'm not aware of it because it's not in our market, and I honestly don't keep track of.
No, absolutely. I'm just saying that we would use it a lot more. It's on the deck, so it's not really the same level of transmission.
It's like an intercom thingy.
It's pretty good audio for corporate stuff and everything else, and people doing presentations, but not necessarily on what we would do here. But the fact we use them for comms, like we give them to some folks because it's really low profile. We just hand them something. We can talk to our producers. It's really good.
Okay.
Next question.
It comes from Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida, and he says, "I just want to applaud Glenn's background. And for those of you listening only, he's got these 3 really lovely golden statues that are very familiar over his left shoulder. It's a great example of a picture is worth 1,000 words."
What do you got back there?
We have 3 Emmys, one for TBC Control, one for Deva, one for Digital Recording Wireless, and we've got a SciTech Award from the Motion Picture Academy for Deva.
That's great. Fantastic. Glenn, thank you so much for spending an hour with us. We really appreciate it. It's been really informative for us.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this and certainly would love to do it again if the opportunity arises.
Well, we're definitely going to see you at NAB. We've got, I think, about 50 people working on coverage for NAB. So we'll definitely come and hang out with you there.
Before we go, just one very quick thing. I know you must have experience with this, but this is our sports transmitter, the one that's flexible.
Oh yeah, that's amazing.
And,
nice.
Yeah, that's something we do for professional sports teams like the NFL and others, and just a cool thing. And it records and does all the good things we do. So
it's an amazing thing to have a transmitter that you can bend and super useful. We
did not invent that, but we certainly were asked to do it, so we did.
That's great. That's fantastic. So we'll see you in about a week and a half. We'll stop by the booth and see what you have that's new and big at NAB. We're really looking forward to that. So thanks so much.
Great. I had a great time today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, really, really our pleasure. It was great to have you here. And thanks to our producers on the watching and asking all these great questions, keeping the conversation moving forward, both in the first hour and second hour. Thanks to the panelists, can't do this without you. And thanks to the incredible team, the small village that lights up all over the world to produce this show on a daily basis. We really appreciate your contribution. The Tlaloc Traversal, we traveled 84,000 miles, 136 1,000 kilometers, and that's more than 671 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. All right, this is where we whisper because we don't want to distract anyone from the thing. But
That transmitter is amazing.
I know. Can't wait to see what's new.
Technically, you can, of course, bend any transmitter.
Thank you, iPhone.
You just can't use them again. But everything will bend.
Not the same as having a power forward slam into it during a game.
Yeah, that's the guards, by the way. Offensive guards, they're the ones that get the mics, just in case you're wondering.
Everything bends once.
Yeah, exactly. All right, see ya.